Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. Want to say hello to everybody watching the show this evening. It is prime time, so we want to talk about the prime position in the NFL, which is quarterback, and specifically how Baker Mayfield fits this Bucs offense. We're going to talk about an article that Pewter Report's Josh Capo wrote about with some clips as well. We got some tape to break down for the Pewter people on tonight's show. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Josh Capo was going to join us, but unfortunately, the power went out in his house and is still not back on. So pinch hitting. He's usually here on Thursdays anyway. We're very happy to have him on. Taking his place, coming in clutch, is Adam Slavon of PewterReport.com. Adam, what's going on, my man? Thank you so much for joining us so last second.
Oh, yeah. It's always a pleasure. It's great to be on. And the subject at hand today is also going to be pretty interesting to break down and dissect, and excited to do that with you.
Yeah, I mean, we've had our fair amount of discussions about the quarterback position, who's going to win, Baker, Kyle Trask, and we've broken down a lot of the comments that these quarterbacks have made over the last month or so since Baker joined the team and since Trask has a legitimate shot to actually be the starter versus the past couple seasons. So it's nice now to legitimately just talk about the offense and the thrower themselves. And obviously we'll see a lot more about that when training camp rolls around next week, which we are very excited for. We've put in our credential request for training camp. It's coming up very, very soon, so can't wait to get into that. So, Adam, I'll ask you, let's throw the quarterback competition to the side because we all are very interested in that. With the exception of the quarterbacks, what are you most looking forward to for training camp this season? This is your second Bucs training camp, so coming in with a lot more experience now as opposed to last year. What are you going to be watching? Any players, positions, battles for a starting position? Let the Pewter people know.
Yeah, so for me, besides the quarterback picture, obviously, that'll be very interesting. What really sticks out is the offensive line in front of the quarterback, I think is a variable not a lot of people are considering how vital it's going to be for the offense this season. And Ryan Jensen coming back, you have Cody Mauch, fan favorite pretty much immediately when he was drafted.
Friend of the program.
And friend of the program, as well as Luke Gedeke, another friend of the program. Just seeing how the right side of the offensive line will do is going to be key because those are two young players and they have some big shoes to fill. And Tristan Wirfs, he's moving over to the left tackle. Obviously, that's the storyline to monitor and consider how he will do. And just seeing offensive line and how it does and how it supports the running game with the wide zone scheme, kind of switching it up from last season with Leonard Fournette, running it up the middle. Just kind of seeing how the offensive lineman can adjust to that. I think that's going to be one of the things I'm most excited about. And if I were to say the defensive side of the ball, the secondary, I think is going to be really interesting. After Carlton Davis, his discussion with Tyler Dunn and the article that came out, going to be really excited to see the secondary. Antoine Winfield Jr., he's primed for a big year, a contract year. And then Ryan Neal as well. And just seeing if he can break out. I think those are all really interesting storyline. So it's going to be fun to see both sides of the ball, and I think those positions most.
Great minds think alike, Adam, because I was asked yesterday on the Pat and Aaron show, and I'm kind of repeating myself because I mentioned this yesterday on the podcast briefly, but I got asked a similar question, and I said the offensive line because it's so in flux, but also we know what's ahead. Like, we know who the starters are, at least for the meantime. But because it's a zone blocking scheme, that changes. There's more of an emphasis, as you were talking about. I think that's very different in itself, which is super, super interesting. And even though we, love friends of the programs that are kind enough to give us their time to join us on the podcast, I think the Bucs are asking a lot of, Cody Mauch to start at right guard as a rookie. And same with Luke Gedeke with the way that he struggled last year. So nothing is clearly set in stone on the right side, but it's a big flip of the coin of if both of those guys play well, the Bucs may have a top 5 offensive line in the league when you consider and Ryan Jensen is another big piece of the puzzle. But like if Jensen gets back to his, one of the best centers in the league type of ways, and if Josh Capo join us, says, "Hi guys, sorry I can't be on right now. It's dark in here." Josh Capo, even without electricity,
He's coming through.
Still comes through and wants to watch the show. Josh, not all heroes wear capes. You just have yours in your name. Josh Capo, great to hear you on the comments as well. But like if Jensen gets back to his elite ways and Tristan Wirfs still plays at that high level, you could make the case that the offensive line could really do some damage this year, but they have to play to their abilities. And on the defensive side, you mentioned Ryan Neal. I was just doing another podcast before, and I got asked about like a couple of breakout players. And one of the guys I mentioned was Ryan Neal. And it's fun because when you think of breakout player, you don't necessarily think of like a guy that's new to this team. But his situation being so specific, where he was with Seattle, had the highest rating on Pro Football Focus, becomes available in free agency. And now not only is he on a new team, but he's working with Antoine Winfield Jr. I think that they're going to make each other better as a great duo back there. And it's the Shaq Barrett method. Now he gets a chance to be a full-time starter the entire season. Can he make the most of it? I think he has great opportunity to be a full-time starter and a player.
Yeah, I really like that comparison to Shaq Barrett and just getting that first full-time opportunity, like just being able to excel in that role. And like Winfield, if he balls out this season, he could get a big contract as well in free agency.
Yeah, Bucs between Tristan Wirfs, Wirfs they have the 5th year, but Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. Some good draft picks. Yeah, exactly. Back up the Brinks truck. Speaking of going back, Adam, you had a very interesting article come out today called Lost at Sea, Forgotten Bucs Quarterbacks. You were looking at some of the quarterbacks of years past for the Buccaneers, way before Jameis Winston, way before Josh McCown and all of those guys. Why don't you tell us, the Pewter people, a little bit about what this article is about?
Yeah, so recently, like the past week or so, I've kind of been going over the team seasons from 1976 to 1996, kind of inspired by the creamsicle uniform reveal, going back to when they originally wore the creamsicles and seeing all the seasons of there were a lot of dark years, but there's a lot of players that still shined even in those dark times. So kind of going over the quarterbacks, the most important position. Bucs fans, Doug Williams is a name you shouldn't forget. He's someone to remember, and just what he overcame to really bring the Bucs from a laughing stock to a respectable contender. The first 2 seasons in the franchise's history, they won 2 games, and he comes in 1979. They make it to the NFC Championship game with him under center, and the only winning seasons the team had were with him as a quarterback. And he went on, obviously, to Washington, winning the Super Bowl, getting the MVP in that game, and just facing a lot of challenges, but overcoming them. And then also, can't forget Vinny Testaverde. I know you're a Jets fan, so
New York Jet great, Vinny Testaverde, Long Island native.
Vinny and the Jets.
Yeah.
So he didn't really have the best circumstances around him. The quarterback before him, Steve Young, he left and had great success with the 49ers. And just seeing Vinny Testaverde, he didn't have the best circumstances. And obviously, after he left the Bucs, he would play 15 more seasons. But it's also worth mentioning him and just the prestige that he had coming into the league. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, Trent Dilfer, from 1994 to 1999, really brought the Bucs in between 2 eras, from the dark era to the Super Bowl contending team that would be in the early 2000s with the defense. You kind of saw that towards the latter part of his tenure, but making the Pro Bowl, being an efficient quarterback, and not losing games, I think was big. So those are 3 quarterbacks Bucs fans should remember.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great deep dive, Adams, and a very fun read. Definitely recommend everybody checking it out. We actually met Doug Williams at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. We met him briefly. Scott Reynolds knows him a little bit, and he is in the Bucs Ring of Honor. But I do think maybe it's because they didn't win a Super Bowl, and obviously Doug Williams went on to win a Super Bowl, as did Trent Dilfer going to the Ravens later on in his career. And oddly enough, won the Super Bowl. The game was played in Tampa, of all places. So a little bit of history there as well. But maybe it's because, Tom Brady came in here and there's all the fanfare. And maybe because it was so long ago in the 70s. But like Doug Williams was a big deal for the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And I think he would have stayed as well. But apparently the owner wasn't a nice guy. I think he was like pretty racist. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I
And
think that's kind of the story. And Doug Williams is like, I won't stand for this. So,
and that was a big reason the Bucs didn't get Bo Jackson too.
yeah, exactly. So, obviously not great, and no one wants that type of ownership at all. And so it was good to see Doug Williams win with Washington, and their owners pretty wild as well in a bad way.
And he just got kicked out.
Yeah, he just got kicked out, and Washington sold to new ownership today. Vinny Testaverde, so interesting as well, because he went to the U. I believe I don't know if he won a Heisman Trophy or not, but he definitely was like a Heisman candidate year in and year out. And as Tony D says, Hugh Culverhouse was as cheap as can be. Shaggy says that's an understatement. But yeah, like, I don't know, it's very odd with the Bucs because a lot of their former quarterbacks go on to have pretty good careers. Like Vinny never won a Super Bowl, but he had like a really good run with the Jets, taking them to the AFC Championship game, I believe in either 98 or 99. They lost to the Denver Broncos. I mean, you can even talk about who am I? Well, I mean, like Steve Young, for example, obviously went on to have a Hall of Fame career. So it's crazy, like what kind of works, what doesn't work with quarterbacks, and how come in Tampa it never seems to find its place. And same thing with Trent Dilfer, definitely more of a journeyman, but still had his start in Tampa, and then things went off from there. So definitely a good look down memory lane. I think Bucs fans still enjoy talking about the past, even though it wasn't the best. I think it's easier to, I guess, laugh about it now because, you have the Super Bowl with Sapp and Lynch and everyone like that. And then obviously with Brady and everyone. So yeah, definitely an interesting read. And especially the quarterback position is the most important in football.
Yeah, definitely. And also it creates a lot of what if scenarios too. Like I mentioned Trent Dilfer, he left for the Baltimore Ravens. What if he would have stuck around and played for the Bucs on the 2002 team? Would they still have made it to the Super Bowl? Or you have Doug Williams with the contract dispute. If he didn't have that, would the Bucs have continued their winning ways, and what would that have led to? So just a lot of little interesting like scenarios that the Bucs could have taken, and obviously history's history, but you also learn from it too. And I think the Bucs have, and within the past 20 years have become a lot more stable as an organization.
What's very interesting as well is you always say like, oh, you got to draft the quarterback and develop him and make him the guy. But the Bucs in their history have found the most success with finding a veteran quarterback and having them lead the way. Obviously with Brad Johnson, who at this point, I don't know if I'm curious what Bucs fans think. Is Brad Johnson more famous for being a Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Bucs, or all of his trick shots that he has on his TikTok account? It is insane. I need to know, like, I don't even care if it takes him 75 times, but he only puts the one that he converts like on his TikTok, because even then it's still amazing what he does.
Yeah. Hitting the football like to the upright from like 70 yards away, like doing everything with the basketballs, like shooting 2 basketballs at one time. Like, he nuts.
He did one recently. Like he did the typical, he like spins the basketball on his finger and like throws it into, he said like some people in life need a backboard, and he like spun it and like threw it in. And then he's like, some people don't need a backboard at all. And it was like on the other side of the court, it was just a basketball hoop without a backboard or anything. He takes a football and chucks it. And goes in like insane. It's truly incredible. And then of course you have Tom Brady, the veteran, not just a veteran, just the greatest of all time. And he did some good things with the Buccaneers. And the Bucs are going to try to find that again. This time, there's still quarterback competition, but we're under the assumption right now that's going to be Baker Mayfield that gets the job done. So the topic for today's show was how Baker Mayfield fits into this offense. And Josh Capo wrote a fantastic story about it. I'll actually throw it in the chat here so everyone can click on it and read it if you would like to, which again, I recommend. But Adam, you got to fit in as a quarterback in two different ways. Obviously, you got to have the skill set and, things of that nature, master the offense. You also got to have those intangibles and that personality and be a leader and be a teammate. So, in your eyes, in your viewpoint, how does Baker fit in on the latter half of that with the, being a good teammate with the leadership ends of it?
Yeah, so kind of going over a lot of the press conferences since Baker Mayfield signed with the Bucs, you kind of see from different coaches, a former coach, veteran players, rookie players, all really seeing Baker Mayfield and the swag, the confidence that he brings. And I think that's really important in developing a locker room. Levante David, he recently came out and said that Baker is great for the locker room. You have guys like Rashad White and Kate Otten, they're saying that he's very passionate and is fired up. Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles, they've commented on his moxie and guys gravitating towards him. And obviously, Dave Canales said he has great swag. So,
yeah,
just tying that all in together, I think the leadership aspect of Baker Mayfield, he's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder mentality. And for a team that should have some chips on their shoulders from how last season unfolded, coming in as a contender and only getting to an 8-9 record. Sure, they won the division, but there was still a lot to prove. And they didn't prove it all. So they're going to come out hungry this year. And Baker Mayfield, he might be the hungriest of them all because we can kind of dive into it.
Yeah.
His 2021 season and last season, playing through his injury, going to the Panthers, to the Rams, and not really establishing himself in either spot as a starter. He's going to come in hungry at age 28 to be that guy and to prove that he was the first overall pick for a reason. And so I think just tying what he has to prove and his leadership together, I think that's really exciting for Bucs fans to be able to see that, because a lot of people have wrote him off like they wrote off Geno Smith last year, and we all know how that turned out.
I was waiting for you to say he didn't write back.
Yeah, he didn't write back.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points, Adam. The things that I will mention, and it's very interesting with Baker because, like, when Brady came to the Bucs, Brady had the fanfare, and he's a celebrity on his own.
Yeah.
Baker's clearly not on the same level as Tom Brady. No one would ever mistake the two. But because he was so polarizing as a college football player, won the Heisman Trophy, did a billion commercials, and was a little testy at times when answering questions, Baker's kind of been like his own little celebrity as well, but not necessarily trying to show too much cockiness. So it was really cool to see the humble human side of him since coming to Tampa. Like, whether it was he was at a Rays game and he like had a beer with a fan or something like that, or going golfing with Jamel Dean. We saw that. But the biggest thing that really stood out to me is the mixture of like having fun, because I know it's a job, profession, and high stakes, high stress. You still play football at the end of the day. And that's something that Dave Canales has talked about a lot. But what really stood the most out to me was the way that plays would be ran in practice, and then immediately him and Mike Evans are talking after. Him and Chris Godwin are having a conversation. Just the little nuances of, okay, on this play, I see you're running 5 steps. Can you run 7 steps? And I don't know exactly what they're saying. They're 100 yards away, but just you can clearly see them figuring things out. And then you also see Baker having conversations with Ryan Jensen and some of the other offensive line. And I'm sure not every single conversation he has there is XYZ on the playbook. I'm sure there are some like, oh, you like fishing? I like fishing too. That type of scenario. So I like that Baker is like really ingratiated himself with the team overall in such a short time. And I'm not saying Kyle Trask hasn't. Kyle Trask was literally fishing the other day with Ryan Jensen, Kate Otten, and friend of the program, Luke Gedeke. So it's not like Kyle Kyle Trask isn't doing that either. But for Baker to come in and right away hit it off, and sometimes you have to because you are the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
But the vibes seem very high with Baker around.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing that stood out to me was in one of his press conferences, he mentioned like even if he isn't the guy, just being able to be supportive on the sideline, just kind of bringing like positive energy and like charisma, I think is
Yeah,
really important because a lot of times last season on the sidelines, the Bucks looked lifeless. And
they did.
regardless of who Baker, if it's Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask at starter, just having more energy, I think, is important. And obviously, you have Dave Canales, the human Celsius. He's going to be running down the sidelines like Sean McVay does, but just bringing that positivity and those good vibes, as you mentioned, I think will be really critical for the Bucks and just kind of establishing a rhythm and a tempo because they're going to be playing with a lot more tempo this season on offense, I think.
A lot more tempo, a lot more eye candy. Speaking of eye candy, speaking of energy, Adam, you put it up on a tee for me. We know that the best energy drink around, of course, is Celsius Energy and Energy Drinks, the official sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. Check out their newest flavor. That's right, they have new flavors all the time. It is so awesome. This one is a cosmic vibe. It's a sparkling fruit punch. Scott Reynolds of PewterReport.com was drinking it this morning. He posted it to our social media, so you can check it out on Twitter. There's obviously so many different flavors to choose from. Can't wait to try out that cosmic vibe. I love the sparkling orange. I really love the sparkling lemon lime. It's like kind of like having a Sprite. And of course, the vibes are always high on the show. Arctic Vibe is my personal favorite. Peach and tropical are great as well. Also, strawberry lemonade. Don't sleep on that either. There is zero sugar, no post energy drink crash or jitters that you might get with another product out there. If you want to go out and get one, but you don't know where to find one, go to the store located on the Celsius website, punch in your address, and it'll show you the closest geographical location where you can pick one up at your local convenience store or your bodega. And then if you want to start buying it in bulk, go to Amazon, click on the subscribe and save. Have it sent to your residence every week, month, quarterly, or yearly. Get that variety pack, because variety is the spice of life. And make Celsius your number one pick. Celsius, the official sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. Celsius, your number one pick. Baker Mayfield, former number one overall pick. Let's get into this article a little bit from Josh Capo of Pewter Report. .com. One of the first things Josh talks about in terms of what's going to be different in this Bucs offense is just overall the structured plays that can be run with Baker Mayfield. Because when Brady was here last season, he had to get rid of the ball quickly. I mean, he's 45 years old. He can't wait all day. But with Baker, and this is big with Brad Isaac, he's going to be able to extend plays, avoid some sacks, have some organized plays and rollouts. That's something that Baker's bringing to this team that wasn't seen over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, and no offense to Tom Brady, but Baker Mayfield, he's just slightly more agile and athletic at this point in his career. And what I really think that does is opening up the playbook and kind of doing like some different things with play action and being able to roll outside the pocket, improvise, and be able to make some different kinds of throws that maybe you didn't see last season. And one thing that really interests me in that regard is in the beginning of the season, definitely could see it being an instance where Baker Mayfield, he's kind of learning and laying down the foundation and being more of a game manager. But by mid-season, could see him as a gunslinger and just being able to have more freedom, being open in the playbook. Definitely could see a lot of 2020 Browns in that, and just being able to make laser throws down the field and just having a set of weapons around him that's really going to allow him to make the most of what could be bad situations if the pocket breaks down, still being able to throw up a 50-50 ball to Mike Evans and being able to complete it. So just kind of having that, and it really opens up different possibilities for the offense.
Yeah, there's no question about it in terms of a lot of the things that you said. And there is a little bit of that, like, screw it, Mike Evans is open somewhere. But, like, that's fine because that's kind of not exactly designed, but there's room for opportunity in that new type of offense. And he will extend plays. We'll actually play this clip right now. This is Ed Baker. Sorry, what I want to get into, I lost my train of thought for a second. Yeah, you mentioned that season with the Browns. That's his best season of his career. I mean, he threw for like 3,500 yards. What do you have? 26 touchdowns on the season. So I don't know if he can. I don't know if he's going to throw 26 touchdowns this year, but I think he could definitely have a resurgence. Let's get to the clip of him extending plays. This was Browns against the Jets a couple of seasons ago. Baker in shotgun. You could see no one's open. He's got to bide his time. The pocket was pretty good there, but he was able to at least kind of like move. The good thing is like he didn't get too antsy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like he still has a good structure, good footwork, moving around, steps up and makes the throw, being able to, make the play going. But on the other hand, there are times where Baker will get a little bit, too frantic when he's out there. And we kind of ran into this with Baker Mayfield. That's Baker Mayfield. We kind of ran into this with Jameis Winston a little bit, just the overall hero ball type of thing. As Shaggy says, screw it, mic's open, LOL. Sometimes when Baker has those big moments in front of him, is that it can very much be self-inflicted. Josh goes on to say, Mayfield struggles with pocket presence and can move out of structure when he doesn't need to, feeling phantom pressure and bailing from clean pockets. So we just saw a good example from Baker on that last one of staying in the pocket, even though something wasn't necessarily open. This is the downside of it. This is a game between the Browns and the Steelers. You can see him in shotgun once again. Obviously, TJ Watt, one of the best edge rushers in the game, gets there immediately, but he escapes. And then he kind of just tosses it up. It looks like he was looking for 82 on that play. We'll play it again one more time as they show the other angle as well. Thank you, all 22. Yeah, avoids that. Like, does a good job right there. Bide some time, but then he's running, obviously, like, the wrong way. And there's a lot of black Steelers jerseys over there. I'll play it one more time for everybody. And it's just one of those where you're like, oh, what are you doing, honestly?
Yeah. It's very reminiscent of growing up watching the Packers, like the Brett Favre, and just kind of seeing him make he is able to make all the throws, but sometimes the accuracy and maybe the decision making isn't where it needs to be.
Right, and that's actually I'm glad you said that, because Josh actually says in his article. So a lot of these things are variance moments. Like there's high variance and low variance, and Baker and Jameis Winston and Brett Favre, they were all high variance players, like big explosive plays down the field for big scores. The only problem is that like the high variance plays from Brett Favre severely, and Favre threw a ton of interceptions. No one's going to forget about that.
Oh, yeah.
But the high variance plays that Favre had completely overshadowed and outweighed the low variance plays that happened in his career, where Jameis and Baker Mayfield, it's a little like way too even, where the low variance kind of takes over from the high variance plays. Josh goes on to say Jameis was a high variance. It was as high variance as they come. The high end plays Winston could create had you thinking he might be the second coming of Brett Favre. And his low end plays had you thinking he was the second coming of, well, Brett Favre. And then goes on to say Favre was a high variance player as well. He just skewed much more to the high, while Winston skewed more evenly to both sides. Josh says, on the other hand, Tom Brady was about as consistent as they come. From year to year, Brady's level of play was extremely clustered, as he could be counted on to deliver a very consistent performance. Mayfield is much more like Winston than he is Brady. And with that, Bucs fans can expect both incredible and disastrous performances. So I think that's extremely, extremely accurate. Like Brady, you know what you're going to get. And the consistency really in any league is kind of key. You talk about Mike Evans with the overall consistency of his career. With Baker, it very much feels like there's the highs of the highs and then the lows of the lows. And you kind of can't have that in the NFL.
Yeah, and kind of looking at it, there's 2 points I want to make. So
Yeah.
we're talking about the 2020 Browns, Baker
Mhm.
Mayfield, the one that threw 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. His top 3 weapons that season were Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, and Austin Hooper.
Yeah.
Not the biggest of names. Obviously, Odell Beckham didn't pan out there, but just upgrading that and say it's Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, throw in a third, Kate Otten or Trey Palmer or whoever. That's a big upgrade. And one encouraging sign from last season, playing in the Rams, who run a very similar system,
Yeah.
kind of that Shane Waldron influence in Seattle, is what Dave Canales is kind of going to branch off of. And seeing that in 5 games that he started, he only threw 2 interceptions. And I think that's really encouraging. And it's almost reminds me of when Jameis Winston left the Bucs and went to the Saints. He started limiting his interceptions. So there is like a positive sign of
Yeah.
growth in that regard. And also in week 16 last season, Baker Mayfield against the Broncos, he was 24 of 28 and threw for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns and had a really solid game. So when you talk about variance, those are the kind of high variance level games that Baker Mayfield can have when all the chips line up how they're supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's something that's getting overlooked is the fact that Baker gets to play with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And a lot of the times, great wide receivers help make your quarterback look good. You
Yeah.
might be an average quarterback, but you got a Hall of Fame wide receiver and maybe not Hall of Fame yet, but a Hall of very good wide receiver in Chris Godwin. That's gonna make you better. Excuse me. And Canales is gonna put you in the best position possible. Yeah, it's very funny with Jameis because when he went to the Saints, it was almost like he was neutered to a degree. I mean, he had that wild game. You probably remember better than me. He had that game against the Packers to start the season. I think the game was played in Jacksonville because there was like hurricane
Yeah.
warnings and stuff in New Orleans, and he threw for like 5 touchdowns in that game or something like it. And then I remember specifically there was a Saints Patriots game. I want to say 2 seasons ago, and I don't think Jameis may have thrown for like 1 touchdown, but the Saints just turned the ball over, or the Saints created turnovers against the Patriots, excuse me. And so they had all this great field position, and Jameis just had to make sure he didn't screw it up by, throwing the ball away or fumbling or anything like that. And they kept winning games. Like when Baker was healthy
Yeah.
up until Devin White injured him, I keep saying Baker and Jameis, they're really throwing me off. Heisman Trophy winners, number 1
Yep.
overall picks. But Jameis, while it was very subdued, they were winning. Like the Saints were winning with Jameis up until that injury. So, yeah, he kind of got a tough shake there.
Yeah.
So, going further in this article, the next thing that gets brought up really is, and by the way, with the sack numbers, Baker Mayfield, I believe 35% of the time that there was pressure around him, he did get sacked. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind is Baker did take a fair amount of sacks, and you obviously don't want that for this season. So we'll see what's up with that coming up. But the good thing with Baker Mayfield is that he has great arm strength, and he's physically able to make all of his throws, and solid throwing to the outside as well. Josh goes on to say he should do just fine hitting Bucs receivers Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Trey Palmer deep, as I doubt any of them will consistently outrun Mayfield's arm. In addition to the deep bombs, he can throw frozen ropes that require velocity to be successful. There's a couple of clips that we'll throw up right here. We have a lot of clips to get to. This is a nice back shoulder one. Not the longest of throws, but, about almost 40 yards. So nice back shoulder throw. And that's what I'm talking about with the sidelines as well. He has a fade touchdown as well. We'll watch it after this one.
Just being able to have that velocity to be able to put it in that position is huge.
This is a fade to the corner of the end zone. One more time, different angle. And he got rid of it quick, too. Now, granted, he knew he had the one-on-one opportunities. But again, if you get Mike or Chris in one of those situations, well, you might as well get rid of it quickly. Why not?
Yeah. And I know Josh, he also had another article talking about Baker Mayfield and his labrum and how, like, throwing to the left. He had a really interesting point there, and how in 2021 he wasn't able to throw it to the left as much. And just being able to be healthier last season and improving in that area, I think health is also a big factor when talking about Baker Mayfield, and just being able to have like the stability going through a normal offseason without having a coaching staff like last season with the Panthers. Matt Rule was on the hot seat coming in, and Todd Bowles in that regard isn't necessarily on as hot of a seat, but coming into those circumstances throughout his career, Baker Mayfield hasn't had the most like stable environment. And just being able to come in this season healthy, making throws to both sides of the field, you see it there, just seeing that velocity and movement. It's really encouraging.
Yeah, play action is going to be huge as well. That was a play action play on this one. Obviously going to the outside again, just finding the open man, letting him do the rest. Yards after the catch. That was who was that? He's went to LSU. Was great. Landry, Jarvis Landry.
Jarvis Landry. Yep.
Yeah. So just letting that. This is a play action as well. That was over the middle. That's actually where he struggles. We're going to talk about that one next. And this is a play action pass with a double move on the play, showing that arm strength again. Great move by the wide receiver, obviously wide open. Didn't need to do too much on that one, but you can see, obviously, the use of play action. Baker loves it. Every quarterback loves it, but Baker can really use it a lot, can roll out as well. Roll out a little bit there. But even just like that little bit of movement, there was a defender. If he would have stayed in the pocket, that defender would have got to him. I'll play it again one more time real quick. Like Baker moving just a little bit spared him just a tad bit of more time. And then obviously with the double move, you do need a little bit more of time. And Baker was able to pull that off rather well. Let's get to some comments too. Clack5 White says, I see none of this hype, and Baker, likable or not, I want a consistent quarterback. And Michael Perkins is on the other side of it saying, Baker's so underrated last year, and 21 should be thrown out. In 2019, his head coach was freaking Freddie Kitchens, LMAO. If he has an O-line, he'll do well. There are like a ton of different variables when it comes to Baker, because you can make the case like, oh, yeah, he had all these turnovers, but he had the rotator cuff, everything you said, Adam, about just a lack of stability, not as many weapons as you have in Tampa Bay. Really, the only thing we can agree on is that everyone's going to have a different opinion on Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and kind of going over it, like some of the comments, there was one here kind of mentioning the last 5 seasons of Seattle quarterback stats. And I think this is also a sign, like another positive sign. Like there's a lot of things. He could be the next Drew Brees, or he could flame out. And there's just so much variance, which really makes it exciting. And I don't think the Bucs could have brought in a guy who has like so much he's not really high risk, high reward per se, but it's not like Jacoby Brissett, where you know what you're getting. You're getting a game manager kind of quarterback. Yeah. You're getting an exciting guy who, whether you like him or not, has an aura about him. And it's going to be really interesting to see how he's able to fare in Dave Canales' offense. Yeah. And one thing that really stood out to me was when Canales said there's so many different ways to get to the right play. And having a guy like Baker Mayfield who's able to do that in a variety of ways will be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into, I spoke about it briefly about Brad Isaac, where he put such an emphasis on the footwork to making sure everybody looks the same way when they're getting out of a route and starting to run, because there's so much deception and movement in this offense. Like they're trying to confuse the defense, and you can run a certain play out of so many different sets because all the get-offs all look the same. So I think that's super important, and that's something else that's really going to help out Baker Mayfield. And man, it's just there's a lot to like about Baker, but there's also certain things that you worry about. I mean, still the Drew Brees thing, yeah, like the size. I wonder how much of a concern that is for the Bucs. I mean, they Canales had smaller quarterbacks. So I don't think that will be too much of an issue. I guess I'll phrase this differently because it is good that Baker does have a little bit of that gunslinger mentality. Could the Bucs still be successful if they have a Baker that kind of dials it down a little bit so there's no turnovers, or if they had like another quarterback that was more of a game manager? Are the Bucs still good enough to be a team where it's like, hey, as long as you don't beat yourself, you're going to win the division?
I think you saw that a lot last year. And like Tom Brady, like, of course it's Tom Brady and he's able to lead teams to the late game comebacks. But a lot of the time it was the defense that really kept the team in the ball game when the offense sputtered out for the first 3 quarters. And so like Kansas City, before Patrick Mahomes, they had Alex Smith. And if he's just Alex
Yeah.
Smith, not somebody who needs to light up the stat sheet and put up big numbers, but
Another
just somebody
number
who
one
can,
overall pick.
yeah, I think 2005, the Aaron Rodgers draft. But just being able to throw maybe 200 yards a game, 1 or 2 touchdowns, limiting turnovers, and kind of what you mentioned with Jameis Winston going to New Orleans, kind of neutering him in that regard. And he doesn't have to make the big throws. Of course, there'll be times and like play action. Dave Canales, he mentioned he wants to dial that up 3 to 5 times a game and kind of take those haymaker shots. But he doesn't have to do that and put the team on his back every single game and get 30 points. A lot of that will be on the defense and having a lot of Pro Bowlers, a lot of guys that are hungry to win. And so in that regard, I don't think Baker Mayfield has to be the difference maker. He just has to limit the turnovers.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement there. And I think what kind of helps is the fact that in other years, like when he was with the Browns, it was just his job. You know, he was the number one pick. If he messes up, oh well, he's our guy. Like he'll turn it around. Now Baker's in a spot where he has to perform or he will be benched. You know, like he can't just sling it around everywhere and oh, that's a turnover. Whatever. I'll throw a touchdown on the next play. No, if you keep turning it over, they will go to Kyle Trask, and that's the benefit of at least having a quarterback that's been in this system. Well, been with this team for a little bit. It's a new offensive system, but the Bucs do have another option when it comes to the quarterback position if it doesn't work out with Baker. But if you want to manage your money correctly, there's only one option. The best option is Immuni Financial.
At Muni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Dude,
Congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you.
And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you? Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it. All right. Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Muni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
Head on over to immunifinancial.com. They have so many different ways that they can help you. They are proudly serving clients across the country since 1980. So it doesn't matter where you are in the country, Immuni Financial can still help you. They have so many different services, from advisory and brokerage services. They got legacy and retirement planning, investment banking, insurance services, annuities, sales and trading. If you have a kid that's getting ready to go to college and you need to set up a college account as well, they can help you out. So give them a call for a free consultation over at Immuni Financial. All right. Again, Baker Mayfield is not perfect. So one of the big ways that he struggles is with the intermediate throws. That's something that has really hurt Baker Mayfield in the past, and just his overall accuracy in general. Scott Reynolds. Josh Capo says, while he has arm talent for days, Mayfield's accuracy is more erratic and overall below average for a starting quarterback in the NFL. Since 2018, there have been 50 quarterbacks who have attempted at least 600 passes. Mayfield ranks 45th among them in adjusted completion percentage. For those who are unfamiliar with them, it attempts to filter out throwaways and drops from a quarterback's completion percentage to get a more stable idea of how accurate that passer is. The average for the 50 quarterback sample size over the 5 years is 72.72%. Former Saints great Drew Brees leads the pack at 79%. Mayfield clocks in at 69.68%. Very nice. Ahead of Taylor Heineke, Davis Mills, Jameis Winston, Drew Lock, and Zach Wilson. And he's just behind Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco, Mitch Trubisky, and Andy Dalton. Not exactly a who's who of Hall of Famers. Josh talks about the overall struggles that he had with intermediate throws. That's the middle of the field from 10 to 19 yards, and where there's the heaviest traffic on the field with linebackers and, defensive backs moving around as well. And he was ranked 42nd in overall target rate based on Pro Football Focus. And so not obviously ideal in that section. We do have a couple of clips showing the struggles of Baker when it comes to showing, throwing over the middle and things of that nature. Let me see if I can find it. Nope, that was a good play by him. Oh, yeah, this is a dig route I was looking for. I knew it was a Jets game. See, about 15 yards over the middle. Just missing out on it, though. Show one more. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that accuracy is like the one big knock I would say that makes me think he won't have a Geno Smith kind of year, because Geno Smith last year, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he led the league in completion percentage, hovering around 70, 71%.
Yeah,
and Baker Mayfield in his career, he hasn't completed more than, I think, 64% of his passes. So while he's not the most accurate quarterback, also scheming guys to get open will be huge. I know Mike Evans has said he hasn't felt this open in years. So there's kind of some give and take in that regard. But just being accurate with his throws is going to be like the biggest X factor. And obviously with any quarterback, it's accuracy. But with Baker Mayfield, he's going to have to elevate it maybe and have like a career high season and completion percentage.
Yeah, this is another one. No question about it. I mean, just get rid of the ball quick, find the open guy. There's a reason this is a quarterback-friendly offense. So, as you said, with so many guys getting open like quickly, you don't have to do too much. There are going to be plays where you need to extend the play, but in the meantime, just find the open guy. That's all Dave Canales is asking for. This is another example of him throwing an interception on a intermediate play. And that was just like a simple slant route as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he just didn't see the other defender, but I don't know. It was right there.
And not being able to see him, that's a big thing too, being a shorter quarterback.
Mm-hmm. He's looking at him too. Yeah, that's Minka Fitzpatrick. Yeah. I want to watch this one more time because I don't think Fitzpatrick is like crazy far back. Yeah, he's over the middle. Starts back there. Then he moves up almost right away. Yeah, and you'll see when it cuts to the next camera, Baker's just looking to his left the whole time. Like he doesn't even take a second to look at Fitzpatrick.
That's his first read, and he's just going with it.
Exactly. So that's obviously something that needs to be cleaned up. I don't want to switch gears too much, but did you see that Vita Vea cut his hair?
No, I did not.
You have to look at it right now. Just
right.
Scott Reynolds just tweeted about it not too long ago, and Greg Allman posted it on his social media.
Oh my gosh,
that's a lot of hair.
Yeah,
I wonder.
He looks like a new man.
He is. He's a new father. Just had a child. His wife had a child recently. I want to say like a month or two ago. He's getting that dad haircut.
I'm a fan. I approve.
And I saw someone put it in the comments earlier, so shout out to that as well, but I didn't notice it at the time. Yeah, absolutely crazy. Definitely recommend everybody go and try it out or try out looking at the picture. And another thing you really should be trying out is Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has their Best Ball Mania coming up make sure you get on it sooner rather than later. $3 million to the first place winner. A lot of fun in the aspect of there is, no trades need to be made. You don't need to set your lineup up differently every single time. You just kind of set it and forget it. Use that promo code Pewter to get some money off, some money into your deposits. You can start doing the Best Ball Mania. You can do head-to-head matchups, some verses, whatever you want to do. They have it for all the sports. Yes, they have it for football, but you can do it right now for baseball. You can do it for hockey and basketball when they get here. It's a ton of fun to pay attention to some of your favorite players, your favorite teams, and $3 million and $15 million in total prizes. They have so many different events. Obviously, Best Ball Mania. They have a lot of different tournaments during the season as well. So use that promo code Pewter for Underdog Fantasy. Get some free money into your bank account. Nobody would have an issue with that. Underdog Fantasy, use that promo code Pewter. That Vita Vea thing's throwing me off, man. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I wanted to pose a question to you, kind of on the topic of Underdog Fantasy. Last week, I know we talked about Rachaad White and maybe his draft value. With Baker Mayfield, let's say he's named the starter week 1.
Yeah.
He hasn't thrown for 4,000 yards in a season. His career high in touchdowns is 28. Do you think he gets to 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns like Geno Smith did last year if he's named the starter and plays the whole season?
I think it's a great question. I'm going to say no. I just think the Bucs are going to have so much of an emphasis in the run game that it's going to take away from some of the touchdown passes that Baker's going to get. I am contradicting myself a little bit because I said Rachaad White. I don't think he's going to have more than 4 touchdowns next season when we did the over-unders. But that's also because I don't think Rachaad White's necessarily going to be the everyday goal line back. I think Sean Tucker could be.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a little bit of like a running back rotation type of thing. I think you're going to see some like different jet sweeps where Chris Godwin may have a rushing touchdown or Devin Tompkins or Trey Palmer. I think the Bucs are going to get super creative with it. I think Baker's going to have a really good season. I don't think he's going to replicate what Geno Smith did, even though it's the same amount of talent and everything like that. But I think it's a fair question. What do you think?
I think he gets to the 4,000 yards. I think the 17th game's a real big factor in reaching that.
Sure.
But the 30 touchdowns, I don't see it being the case, especially as you mentioned with the run game being such an emphasis. And I definitely could see a lot of the the rushing touchdowns being given to a guy like Sean Tucker or Keyshawn Vaughn, who may have a case for that second running back role. But with Baker Mayfield, his yards per game passing have gone down every year, I believe, since his rookie season. Like, he lit the world on fire his rookie year. He averaged like 266 yards a game passing, had the rookie touchdown for passing touchdowns. But since then, he hasn't really been able to find the end zone like that or been able to replicate it in that regard. So I think he's going to have trouble reaching, I think Brady threw 25 touchdowns last year. That might be like the ceiling there.
Right. I think that 2020 season, I don't want to call it a flash in the pan, but it was just an incredible season. And it's, as we're learning, it's very difficult to replicate great seasons. So Capo's article goes on to talk about how Baker, is he a gunslinger? And then he closes it out by saying, now knowing that Baker Mayfield is a big arm, slightly inaccurate gunslinger who doesn't put the ball in harm's way as much as one might think, and one who will take sacks at an extremely high rate, I foresee a guy who's going to rank around 15th to 20th in the NFL this season. When you add in the context of a familiar system that he has had success in and high-end playmakers, but also a questionable line, a rookie offensive play caller, and a conservative head coach, I think that adjusts his overall production down a little to 17th to 23rd overall. The real key comes back to the variance that Capo talked about earlier. This aggregate rating will come within the context of streaky play. There will be a 4-game sample sizes where Mayfield will look like he has figured it all out and play at peaks that rival Josh Allen, while his low-end play will look like that of Mike Lennon. It will all come down to which end of the spectrum he can sustain for longer periods of time in Tampa Bay. That is quite the spectrum between
The Mike Glennon
Josh
shout-out.
Allen and Mike Glennon. That is a heck of a comparison. By the way, we have a heck of a guest, quite the guest, coming up on Monday's show. We are very lucky to be joined by Bucs Ring of Honor member and Hall of Famer. He will be inducted in a couple of weeks in Canton, Ohio, in the NFL Hall of Fame. Bucs legend Rondé Barber joins us on Monday afternoon at 4 p.m. with Scott and myself. Very, very excited to have one of the greatest Buccaneers of all time joining the Pewter Report podcast on Monday. Very, very excited to have Rondé on. Gonna be a great show talking about everything from his Bucs playing days, going to the Hall of Fame, what that means to him. We'll ask him a little bit about this current team as well. He's obviously very involved with the team still to this day. So Rondé Barber on Monday's show going to be...
That's a can't-miss show.
That is a can't-miss
awesome
show for the man that is going to Canton very, very soon. So that's going to do it for us this week. Please follow us on our social media if you're not already doing so. On Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Pewter Report. And our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. We got the podcast 4 times a week. We got various clips that always go up, player interviews, press conferences, locker room stuff, things from practice as well that when we are allowed to film. So a lot of great stuff coming up this season too. So please like and subscribe. Give us that thumbs up. Subscribe to Pewter Report TV if you're not already doing so. That's going to do it for us on tonight's show. For Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We will see you next week with Rondé Barber on the show for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Have a great weekend. Out.